Phil Howard went out of the picture for some reason.
Well, so does the word Megalopolis ring a bell with you?
Well, as
You see now, at one point, Elton lived in Stoke Newington with his wife Jo. They'd had their daughter
Jana.
Then. Shortly after that happened, we moved into Walford Road in Stoke Newington. So there was Elton and Jo living down the road. Upstairs lived Lynn Dobson, who was tenor saxophone player and flautist. And next door to Elton, the other side, lived Phil Howard and his wife, whose name I can't remember, and their son. And frequent visitors at that point were Keith and Julie Driscoll, as she then was, Mark Sharrick, who lived around the corner with his girlfriend Anne Winter, and Joe Gallivan used to call in from time to time, who Elton had met out in America.
Yeah.
So that was a huge melting pot, Walford Road, that went on. So at one point, and I can't remember, I think this was after Just Us had kind of disbanded, perhaps around the time, as you say, that Louis was dabbling with the idea of being in the band. Phil Howard had the idea that he wanted a sort of a fusion band. I'm not sure whether Bitches Brew was out at that point by miles.
69, 70.
Yeah, but you can imagine with those number of musicians and people playing, rehearsing, living, there was music going on all the time. So there was this sort of cross-fertilisation of all of those different types of giant steps had been released, and everyone was, all the tenor players were all trying to get their head around that, you know. So Phil Howard had the fusion band. He was Jim Kidner on guitar, a bass player called Snowy something, whose name I cannot remember, myself on guitar, and the band was called Megalopolis. Wow. And it was a sort of a fusion band. And Phil had the idea that what he wanted to do was raise the roof. And I think, well, at one time he did. We got stopped by the police mid-rehearsal, who had burst into his top room where we were rehearsing, saying, didn't we know what a noise we were making? And pointed out the window to us. The entire all the residents of Walford Road had been gathering out the front to tell us to shut the fuck up because of the noise we were making. We were thunderously loud.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, a lot of that got recorded at Pathway Studios. What happened to it, I've no idea.
I'd never heard of that band. I mean, did you ever play live?
Yeah, we played at, there was a place back in the day down in Stoke Newington High Street, or Kingsland Road, called Centerprise, that was like a cultural meeting point. It was a library, a kids playground, a creche, a cafe, a library, a bookshop. It was for everybody of every sexual persuasion and every colour. Come in, welcome to Kingsland Centerprise. And that put on gigs, and we played there. And we played a few other places, I think, not very many places. It kind of fizzled out. And then the extraordinary thing is, nobody knows what's happened to Phil Howard.
Yeah, exactly.
He seems to have disappeared.
He's back in Australia. That's the last I heard. But
well,
that's sort of a vague.
There's a few people
nobody's really sure.
Been asking about him. There's there's a Russian friend of Gary's, my brother Gary in Gentle Giant, who wanted to know what the whereabouts of Phil Howard was, and we don't know. At
one point, I remember talking to Elton Hugh, and they had royalties to give to him, and they couldn't find him.
Right.
So he did a good job of disappearing. He was supposedly working on an oil rig in the late 70s, and then he was supposed to be living in New York.
Well, I mean, he had extraordinary tales. He was an extraordinary person, you know, very out. You know, I mean, I think at one point he told us he was a soldier in the Malaysian jungle. You know.
And would that have been true, or out of his imagination?
It could well have been true, because he was incredibly capable, very intelligent, but sort of rogue.
Yeah,
you
his
know.
playing certainly. I mean, it doesn't.
I've never heard anybody play like Phil Howard.
Yeah.
He got a sound going, not unlike Elvin Jones,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
who's got to be like one of the best players ever in the history of drums, you know.
But the people in Soft Machine found it a bit too free, a bit too extreme. So that's why they got John Marshall actually.
Yes, yeah, well, you
better
can see
behaved.
that, because everything would have to go Phil's way because he was such a powerful player.
Yeah.
But I mean, when he got into this was why all these people were out the front at Walford Road. It wasn't that they didn't like music, but the insistence of the way that Phil played and everyone around him rose up to the noise level. It would be like Big Ben bonging, bong. There was this swing underneath like that, almost like a dinosaur walking down the road. Around it was going, but like underneath was this lope that used to go on, and only Phil could like make it work like that, and it was extraordinary, and it drove you along to want to play with him to like heights of insanity, you know. It was very enjoyable playing it, as I say. For those that weren't involved in the playing of it, it was very difficult to listen to, I guess, and that's what the people that's why they called the old Bill, to shut us up.
Yeah.